to the Muslim, which says that the Jews and the Christians should have stood fast by their Torah and their Injil, and they would be successful. If you put that all in its context, what is under discussion is the fact that some of the Jews and the Christians had complained that they were not successful. They did not have a Christian state. And they were told in the verses leading up to this in the Quran that the reason for that was they had ignored the rules and the advice given to them in their books, the Torah and the Injil, saying if they had done what Jesus said to do, they would today be successful. So the Muslim does not expect there's any theology in there. Whatever the gospel is, it's a bunch of advice and rules of conduct. It doesn't deal with subtle and convoluted definitions of the nature of God and a whole manufactured Greek vocabulary to describe all these various subtleties. And ironically enough, there are 4 books that go by the name Gospel, and the only one with any theology of any significance is the Gospel according to John. The irony is that that's the only one of the 4 Gospels that doesn't have the word gospel in it anywhere. That is, if people would explain theology from the words of Jesus, they have to quote from John, not from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which call themselves Gospels, or at least mention the Gospel. Now, I know how the rest of the argument goes, and I'm not ridiculing anybody. I'm just trying to show you that I'm familiar with it. I've heard it many times. The documentation of the life of Jesus is usually cited as being a proof of the theological claims. That is, people will usually start by saying, but look, the Jews who were right there with him, they understood him to claim divinity. So they did. The problem is, did they understand him correctly or not? His disciples didn't seem to know what he was talking about. We're all the way to the 16th chapter of Matthew before Peter gives some kind of a theological statement, and Jesus congratulates him saying, you didn't even know that till it was revealed to you. Evidently it wasn't very obvious by anything Jesus had been saying to that point. But on the other hand, to the Jews, every time he opened his mouth, he was claiming to be God. It may well be that the Jews were misunderstanding him. And that is precisely the point of the 10th chapter of John, where the Jews accused him of blasphemy, claiming equality with God, and the rest of the verse goes on, the rest of the chapter continues on to have Jesus defuse the situation to show them that if they listened more carefully to what it is he said and read their own scriptures more carefully, they'd see they had no grounds for a claim of blasphemy. He doesn't congratulate them on their insight, that they heard him right, it's too bad they don't like it. He goes back to show them that they cannot convict him according to anything he just said. Both the Jews and Jesus used the term Son of God of themselves and of one another. What did they mean? Did they both mean the same thing, or did they mean different? According to the 8th chapter of John, the Jews came to Jesus and said, we're sons of God. He said, no, I'm the Son of God. You're sons of the devil. Well, why should the one be a great theological statement, I'm the Son of God, capital S, and you're sons of the devil, figuratively speaking, of course? Perhaps they were both talking about the same sorts of things figuratively at that time. In any case, as I said, the encouragement is to think these things through, and there are a number of standard objections that are made. That is, if a person thinks too hard about these things, he may be told on the one hand, you're going so deeply into something, you're forgetting something very important. The Bible was written for simple people. Interestingly enough, the same people who say that really mean to tell me that your problem is you haven't consulted an expert. See, on the one hand, you are told it's written for simple people, and in the same breath you're told the reason you don't understand it is because you don't know enough about it. You should go and ask this man, he studied it for years. Those are really quite contrary ideas. Thinking will lead you astray, people have often said. In fact, I've heard it said, thinking will lead you astray. I want you to think about that. Now, put that all together, you see. Is the thinking going to lead us astray? That certainly is a subject for thought, right? But then I might go astray. It's a tangled little knot. The common statement, this is a substitution of slogans for thinking. Another common statement is, if you will surrender your own judgment, God will guide you. Well, maybe He will. But maybe it works like this. Maybe God says, surrender your own judgment and I'll see to it you go astray. That might be the way things work. That also makes a little more sense to me. That is, after all, the view the scientist has. He says, set aside your personal preferences and use objectivity. That is, keep your judgment when you're investigating something. Don't be blinded by what you are sure must be the case or what you would like to be the case. Set aside personal preferences. And that's such a good argument, such a good suggestion, that in fact it is used by some of the very people that I have the confrontation with. Their problem is they say, yes, set aside your personal preferences. But in the list of personal preferences, they put using your personal judgment. So your problem is you prefer to use your head. You should suspend your judgment. The objective questions that, at least I would suggest, are maybe not the ones that people might expect. I think that most often the Christian feels he has a duty to convince the Muslim that Jesus is divine, and the Muslim feels he has a duty to prove that he isn't. And that can be an endless kind of discussion, but I'd say that's probably not a very worthwhile point to get into. I suggest that some of the problems become more apparent if the Muslim asks the Christian to prove the humanity of Jesus. To say, whatever you say he was, I'll grant you that, except for this one thing. Prove to me he was a man. How do you know he wasn't God in disguise like a man? Prove he was a man. What did he do that God can't do? Only a man can do. Prove he was a man. Well, there's only one thing. What did he do that God can't do? You have to be a man to do it. And then the Christian will tell you, he died. See, God can't do that. Only a man can do that. The problem then is that that same death is supposed to be the saving act which a man can't do, only God can do. That is to say, if we crucify a man, it won't save anybody from their sins. On the other hand, you can't kill God, only a man can die. As one Muslim put it about 850 years ago, he said they have an idea of God and man, and then a God-man. And they tell you what we crucified is the God-man, the God-man. But when it really comes down to it, it's the God lived and the man died. And that's not really crucifying a God-man. Any more than if I tell you, I had a sandwich for lunch, except I didn't eat the bread. Then I didn't have a sandwich for lunch. I had a piece of cheese. A sandwich is bread and cheese. To kill a God-man, but to say only the man died, not the God, then that's what happened, not the God-man thing. And these are not novel ideas. These are things that are appreciated by the mainstream of Christianity. There has always been a doctrine of incarnation. That's well defined. There has never been a defined doctrine of atonement, how exactly it's supposed to work. You don't find that explained in any ancient or modern document. You find a lot of talk about it, but there is no creedal statement on that idea because it has never really been figured out how it is supposed to work. I'm not claiming that proves it doesn't work. I'm just saying that that is still supposed to be an open issue. I know that there is a great concern, and the Muslim who is, well, pestered or annoyed by people who are anxious to have him come along and come to their church and so on, he may feel annoyed, but at the same time he tends to appreciate that people may have a proper intention in all of this, that they are genuinely concerned. Their concern, though, is related to, often anyway, it is related to getting someone to take an action which brings about salvation. And there's an interesting point about